Hi, I'm Anne-Marie from brambleberry.com. Thank you for watching this advanced cold process soap making video. For this video, we're taking it back to the soap that was on the cover of my very first soap making book. Back then, I did a 12-color linear swirl. Today, we're just gonna do a 6-color, but there's a reason for it. We are celebrating Brambleberry's 20th anniversary with the release of a Brambleberry fragrance oil. And we spent all year creating it, and I love it. It's a floral, it's fruity, it's kind of got something in it for everyone, and you can do it with a 6-color swirl. Another thing I really like about this Brambleberry inspired soap, this berry swirl soap, is that it uses the Baltic birchwood mold. These are handcrafted right here in Bellingham, Washington, which is where Brambleberry's headquarters are. It comes with this divider set, and these dividers create, of course, the perfect bar. These are beautiful 2x3 bars. They really fit nicely in the hand. You can also buy an optional silicone liner for it. And the reason I like this silicone liner is A, it helps the soap to release easier and faster. B, it saves you time, no lining the mold. And C, this is really shiny, so your soap bars come out pretty shiny on the bottoms and on the sides where they touch the liner. Now, if you don't want to buy the silicone liner, that's okay. You can line this with parchment paper as well. So before you get started, you do want to assemble your dividers so it's all ready to go. These sit off to the side, but you want them assembled because it's not very much fun to have all your soap in the mold and then be like juggling to assemble that. In terms of the colorants, we did update the colorants from my original recipe. And of course, it's a Brambleberry fragrance. We had to go with Brambleberry colors. You'll notice there's a little bit of black in there, and the black is there to provide contrast. But when we're making this recipe, you'll see I'm only using about half the black as the rest of the colors, because if you do much more than that, it turns out to be a pretty dark bar as opposed to just that black providing the contrast. Now, if you've never made soap before, of course, stop, watch the first 4 videos in the soap making series, or read the first 2 chapters in this book or any of my other 2 books, because this is honestly, it is a more advanced idea, right? There's 6 different colors, you're swirling, it's definitely an advanced soap. So get a few recipes under your belt before you attempt this one. So one of the keys to soap making is prep. This recipe does require a little bit of prep. So we have all of the colors we're going to be using, and again, they're Brambleberry inspired colors. I have pre-mixed them in a little bit of oil, so it's 1 teaspoon of colorant to 1 tablespoon of oil, and that breaks up all the clumps. So they're pre-mixed in the oil already. Another thing I've also done is pre-measured my fragrance, my sodium lactate, and made sure that those are ready to go. So let's talk about this recipe. This is the original recipe from when I did that 12-color linear swirl that made the cover of my first book. It uses rice bran oil, olive oil, coconut, and palm, and really it's designed to be there to be pretty slow moving, but still set up well. So it has lots of good lather. It gives you a pretty neutral palette to work with too. It's not too yellow. So before I suit up for safety, I am going to put my colorant into this easy pour container. And like all soap makers, I have my notes close to me to make sure I'm getting accurate amounts of colorants in. So the first one I'm going to be doing is my white. And this is just your traditional titanium dioxide. And I'm going with a full 2 tablespoons of the titanium dioxide, which may seem like a lot, but in order to get that really white contrast, it's the perfect amount. And then my pink is just about 1/2 teaspoon of that titanium dioxide because I want to lighten up the pink, and also 1/2 teaspoon of the Brambleberry Rose Pearl Pink color, which is a really nice rose color that produces a fairly impressive looking pink, which is why I'm tamping it down with that titanium dioxide. And that's gonna go right up here because I'm gonna go lightest to darkest here. And then for my purple, I'm going with the Queen's Purple from Brambleberry, which is 1/2 teaspoon. And notice since I'm going lightest to darkest, I can kind of reuse this without having to rinse it out. And then I'm also going to do a little bit of titanium dioxide with here. So I'm going to get a fresh one for that. I'm just doing 1 teaspoon, and this is a 1/2 teaspoon, so 2 of these. And then for the actual dark purple, I'm going with a full 2 teaspoons of the Queen's Purple, the Queen's Mica. And to give this a little bit more depth and make it a little more brambleberry, also adding 1/2 teaspoon of the Merlot Sparkle Mica. And this is a colorant that Brambleberry's had probably for a decade plus. It's been a perennial favorite because it's stable in cold process soap. So for the dark purple, same thing. We're doing the Queen's Purple Mica, 1 teaspoon, but then we are adding a full 1 teaspoon of dispersed charcoal. And I like the dispersed charcoal because A, it produces a really nice black, but it typically doesn't lather black. And this is gonna give us a really good dark purple colorant. And then finally, for our black color, we're going with 1.5 teaspoons of that charcoal that's been fully dispersed already. And then, like I said earlier, we are going to do less black color than the rest of the colors. So you'll notice that when we're getting ready to pour. So colorant is prepped. Now it's time to measure out fragrance and your sodium lactate. Make sure all that's ready to go before you start. So the most important part of soap making is, of course, suit up for safety. Make sure your kids and pets are in the next room. This process does take a little bit longer than most soap making recipes. So give yourself a solid, hour for making it and clean up and all of that kind of stuff. Got all the colorants here. Have my fragrance, the Brambleberry fragrance, which is very, of course, it's the Brambleberry fragrance. It's very berry forward, but it also has some violet notes, some bergamot notes. It smells so strong that I actually am not using much more than just the lightest of the light on our fragrance calculator for this usage rate. It is, I can't wait for you guys to try it. So with this, because I need these to remain as fluid as possible for the longest amount of time, I'm actually going to whisk in my lye and give it a lot of love and attention to emulsify it before just stick blending, just very, very, very briefly. And then I'm going to put everything into my 6 different containers. And the reason I'm doing that is we want to ensure that we have enough time for that soap to remain really fluid. This design does require a good amount of time in order for you to be able to get that colorant and that design and that swirl. So now I'm just gonna give it a really quick couple of little with the stick blender. Remember, we can always get it thicker in here. Another difference is I am not adding my fragrance to this entire batch. I wanna maximize the time I have to work with these individual colorants. So stick blender goes in, we burp it, and just a really quick, and that's it. And then I'm going to start, then I'm gonna go ahead and start pouring it into my other containers. I'm gonna start with the black because the black is getting just about 300 milliliters, so it's getting the least of the colors. And one thing to note is this is not a great trace. So if I was just going to start making this soap and it wasn't gonna get any thicker, this soap would actually separate. So keep that in mind. We are gonna be working to thicken this a little bit more. I'm going for just about 300 milliliters of that black. I need a little bit more, and then from there I can kind of just eyeball it. Now, we want to make sure that this also does stay together, so I'm going to just give this a quick stir to make sure it stays emulsified, and then I'm going to pour it into our rest of our colors. And for these, we're going for just about 600 milliliters each, and we can kind of eyeball them a little bit more. Okay. Now that I have all of these done like this, I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of just eyeball and make sure I didn't overfill or underfill. And remember, our black is half full, so there's that. And perfect. And before I hand stir in my fragrance, I am going to just give these a quick stick blend, hopefully in the lightest to darkest. So I'm gonna arrange these from lightest to darkest. So now I'm going to work on whisking my colors in before I add my fragrance. And I'm just doing this lightest to darkest. Remember, I am going to stick blend maybe just a little depending on how my trace is looking. Since this does have some olive oil in it and it does have some coconut, it does have some palm, this won't stay fluid like forever, but it does have a really good working time with it, especially with that rice bran oil and the super fat amounts that we have in here. Now it's time for very brief stick blend. So I am going to add my fragrance and then stick blend and then move to the next one. And it's a very, very, very brief stick blend, so it's not a whole lot. I really love how that titanium dioxide pops once it gets micronized a little bit more with the stick blending. The colors just get a little bit better, a little bit brighter, a little bit more even. So the stick blend is pretty essential, but you notice it's literally 1 or 2 seconds of stick blending. Okie dokie. And now we're ready to work quickly. So my dividers are assembled, and I've got my mold here, and the bottom layers aren't as important as the top layer to get like perfect S curves. But once we start getting close to the top, you do want perfect S curves. We're just trying to kind of fill the mold and give it some really good texture and some architectural kind of finish features. I love just those 3 colors on their own. It was so hard to pick the perfect colors for this because just those 3 colors on their own look amazing. And the dark colors, of course, we want, depending on how much contrast you like, you might save some of those dark colors for the top if you want a really contrasting bar of soap, or you can save more of the white and lighter colors for the top. Really what we're going for is to go ahead and make sure that when our last pass is done, we have a good amount of soap in these so that we can get some finer details, because a lot of this design comes from having more lines on the top rather than kind of this big fluid swirling stuff I'm doing right now. So now I have most of my soap in. I'm gonna give these a quick whisk again from lightest to darkest just to make sure they're extra fluid. So that way we have lots of time to work with them. And now I am working low and slow. So you notice that I'm actually getting the soap to stay more on the top of this. And I'm also getting some really good texture out of this. And so with this brambleberry fragrance, I would not say it accelerates trace, but I also would not say that it is the world's slowest moving fragrance. It's not like working with, say, an orange essential oil or a lime essential oil. You definitely have to move a little bit quickly with it. But again, that's why I said that this was more of an advanced recipe. And I really like this design when there's a lot of kind of the lighter colors on top. So that is why I saved more of the white, so I could get more of a contrast. And if your soap starts getting thick, you can have a spoon kind of close by, and you can always give it a little shake to make sure that you're getting a really smooth pour. And since we have some texture going on top, remember, thinking about your design, you're gonna want a little bit of texture on top so you get that really cool kind of almost mottled and cratered look that looks like it provides some interest and, again, some of those architectural elements on the top. If you notice your soap is getting it all thick or grainy, you can always give it another whisk. Like I'm not loving this, and then if this is too thick for you, go ahead and just shake it down. And then once you shake it down, that kind of evens out that textural stuff that we have, but don't worry, when we go to swirl, we'll still get a good amount of texture. And that was the last pour I have of that purple. But so now I have my 3 lighter colors. Like I was saying, I really wanted some light colors on the top because I think this looks really great with the lighter colors. My titanium dioxide is my thickest. I always notice my titanium dioxide gets just a little bit thicker than the other colors, and I think that's because of the clay-like nature of the titanium dioxide. So now I have my white going in a nice diagonal there, or horizontal stripe, and then I'm gonna do pink. And I'm being really careful with my placement at this point because I wanna make sure there's good contrast throughout the entire top of this bar. So do some light purple by that darker purple, get some in there. And this is just about the final pass. And now, we go here, we wiggle this, and then, so now I'm taking a pretty thick kind of paintbrush. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want more texture on top. And this also drags a lot of soap. And so when I did this the original time, I did a thinner trace and a thinner swirl. But again, this is the Brambleberry 20th anniversary. And so I wanted to update a really classic design and a classic technique. So that's why I'm using the slightly thicker back of this paintbrush. I've seen people use really thin things like combs, like the hairpick type combs, and they produce a gorgeously fine line that's more of a feather. And then for this one, since I wanted it a little more updated, I also am going to go all the way around at the end, which helps give the bars on the edges a little bit more differentiation. It also pushes some of the soap up on the side, so you will have to do a little trimming at the end. So it's really pretty. I'm going to go ahead and do loop-de-loops though. The original design did call for it to go straight horizontal like this, but I think it adds a little bit of differentiation to do the loop-de-loops rather than the straight up. And I think it works really well with the fragrance. The bergamot is coming out so nicely right now. There's also some violet leaf notes in here, and so I really like how this top ended up having so much purple and violet in it because I think it matches the fragrance really well. And it's hard to quit playing with these. I'm gonna quit playing. You know what? I'm not gonna quit playing. I totally lied. I see some areas that I would like to get a little bit more swirl in. And there we go. It's so tempting to keep playing with this, but this is pretty perfect. So now the last finishing touch is just to put 99% rubbing alcohol on the top, put it onto a heat pad. But before we do that, if you put the 99% rubbing alcohol on right now and then you put your dividers in, that rubbing alcohol does create a weird crust. So you want to do your dividers now. And so the dividers go in and you just drop them in and press them down. And make sure that they're all the way to the bottom because that's one of the things that makes your perfect 2 by 3 inch bars. 99% rubbing alcohol, spraying it right on, and that helps to prevent any sort of soda ash. And quite frankly, since we're gonna go ahead and put this on a heat blanket, this trace is pretty thick, and of course we did sodium lactate. I'm not expecting any issues with soda ash, but just in case, I'm just gonna do that just to be on the safe side. So the birchwood mold does come with this really great cover, so I'm gonna go ahead and use it. One of the things it does is it helps to insulate the mold because we do want this to go through gel phase. So I'm gonna put this on high on a heating pad for about another hour. I'm gonna check it probably every 20 minutes though to make sure it's not overheating. You wanna be able to touch it kind of on top and make sure that you're feeling that there's heat. Maybe you can open this up and kind of make sure that you're feeling that there's heat. And in fact, if you're really lucky, you'll be able to see it going through gel phase. I like the gel phase for this design though because it does make a shinier bar of soap that you're able to release the soap out of the mold and these dividers way quicker. So obviously I made these a few days ago. I actually made it 4 days ago. And with the sodium lactate and a really good gel phase, I can tell it went through gel phase because it's really gorgeously shiny on top. I'm hoping I can pop these out for you. So the dividers are just a little bit tricky. If you've never used them before, they are totally worth it because you get gorgeously shaped 2 inch by 3 inch bars each and every time. And they're still a little tricky to use. So one of the tips that I do is usually when I have this thing all popped out, I will actually take this and store it overnight like this. So there's some airflow that goes underneath it for like a day or two. That helps these dry. When you go to take these out, a couple things. You never want to rip the soaps away. The reason for that is you literally will rip the soap off the sides. I like to usually start on one of these 4 corners to try and get it out. It's kind of like that game Don't Break the Ice where once one of them goes, they all start going a lot easier. I also will usually just put my entire mold situation on a corner so I can just press down a little bit to try and break the airlock. And this one's coming out really easily, which is nice. Ooh, beautiful. And I love the way the swirls get drugged down the sides from the dividers. It's so pretty, and oh, you could not get a better swirl on top. So now that I have one of these out, it's time to just kind of play with all of these to try and get the rest of them out. And it's an exercise in patience, and it's totally worth it because you get perfectly shaped bars that are nice and smooth on the sides every time. So getting the first few out is always the hardest, and so you just gently press down on one side and one side. The same thing as a regular, any other soap mold, is you're trying to break that airlock so that you can get all the rest of them out. And once you can start wiggling the dividers, then it's a lot easier too. The sodium lactate really helps. I find it pretty much a non-negotiable when it comes to using the birchwood molds. The birchwood divider molds are fantastic, and that sodium lactate is the salt of lactic acid. And what it does in cold process soap is it helps to harden the soap, and it also gives it a more smooth, even finish, more shiny. It's not necessary, but I do find that I can release these bars from the molds just about 1 to 4 days quicker if I'm using the sodium lactate. So now that we have this whole top row out, you can start kind of pushing the actual dividers out and moving them a little bit more to start breaking the airlock. And then from there, it's just a kind of a game of pushing and pulling and breaking the airlocks until all of your soaps are out. And remember, we want to slide the dividers. You don't want to pull, because pulling rips the soap. So I hope you can see now how much easier this is getting now that we've gotten just a few of these out and kind of broken the entire airlock of all of these. This side, I love the way the swirl pattern gets drugged down on the sides. It is so pretty. On the horizontal swirl, depending on kind of how thick your trace is, sometimes you'll get some interesting peaks and valleys too, which is really fun. So now that these are out and they need your regular 4 to 6 weeks of cure time, there could be a little cleanup you want to do. So like here I see that there's a little bit of soap that kind of got stuck on the sides. So you can use the Bramble cleanup tool, or you can use a knife just to kind of smooth these out. You can also just use your finger to kind of smooth out the edges, and you can save the shavings too and put into another batch of white soap and make really cute confetti soap too, because these shavings with the multiple colors end up being really pretty. Thanks so much for watching this video. I can't wait to see what you create with Brambleberry's 20th anniversary fragrance. I can't believe that it's been 20 years. Thanks so much for watching this channel and supporting us as long as you have. I look forward to seeing all of your projects in the future. When you post them on social media, hashtag it, #BrambleOn, so we can see it and the entire soap making community can see it. And of course, if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up below and be sure to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, happy soaping.